Happy Final Four Saturday, everybody. My name is Scott Morgan-Rotham, Motor City Madmouth, and I'll tell you, I've been looking forward to this day for a long, long time. I am joined by my father figure, former FAU coach, because that's what you are. You and Howard Schnellenberger both occupied that, but I ended up meeting at the festival flea market. My wife has actually got to go there to get some stuff later on today. But I was joking with her about where we met over at the festival flea market in Pompano. And I said, Coach and I struck up a friendship that's lasted a long time. And here we are. You know, we worked together when I was covering the team. And now, you know, I've always valued you in the highest regard. And I'm so delighted to have you on from time to time. And today's a pretty cool opportunity for us to talk a little bit of basketball too. So, Coach or Dad or whatever, thanks for joining us today on the Sports Exchange.
Well, it's a pleasure, and thank you for the kind words. I'm glad I'm not old enough to be your father, but thank you.
Well, you look fantastic. You look fantastic. What are you talking about? But anyways, all right, so I want to go over a couple things here. Then I have a few questions we'll get around to. First of all, I remember the time when I covered the Motor City Bowl versus Central Michigan University and the Kentucky FAU game in back-to-back nights. You know, what's so interesting was covered the FAU game, you know, the football game, got stuck over in a rest area. Then I had to race down to Lexington, which was like 8-9 hours in dense fog. It was unreal. Just that whole putting it, but there was no way, the way you schedule these blue blood opponents, I was ever missing out on an opportunity to cover a game at Rupparena, let alone with a team that obviously I work with anyways, and you're the one who obviously scheduled the game in Kentucky. So the one thing and I will never forget after the game, number one, we played Kentucky pretty competitively that game. It's not like they were going to run us out of the gym or nothing like that. You really brought a pretty competitive team over at Rupparena.
We played a really good game. Paul Graham had a fantastic game. I think he had about 30 against them, and we were in a position to win late in the game, and to be able to go into Rupp and do that, you know, with a school the size of Florida Atlantic is pretty good.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, the way they do things at Rupp is like me being at an NBA game. I mean, these guys run a professional atmosphere like I've never seen. It almost felt like an NBA game with the amount of coverage that they were getting in Lexington, you know, and it was something I always wanted to do. But, man, I was just amazed just to go there to see how much they really are into it. And folks, if you've ever have a bucket list of going to college basketball venues, UCLA, I met up with Coach Johnwooden a while back. But I also remember, though, Rupparena they're just totally different animals for sure. And, I think that was just such a good game. And you know what I really enjoyed about it, probably as much as I've taken pictures there, was the fact that you and I, after the game, just spent time talking about life in the locker room, you know, and just for us just to hang out and just talk. It was just so cool. You know, it's not like you were rushing to get out of there right away. We're just soaking in everything. And that to me was just surreal.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I always tried to schedule those types of games. I mean, I've taken teams into Rupp, into at UCLA Poly, at Cameron Indoor, Indiana, Kansas. Right. I mean, we try to play teams in arenas that are historic, so that kids will have those memories for a lifetime.
Yeah, you know, it's funny how you lead into that point. That's what I always liked about what you did. You know, you schedule them against these big blue blood opponents. But when you did that, I have to ask you about the financial part. Did FAU get compensated a fair amount of money for taking on those games, knowing that obviously these games against FAU were not quite quality conference opponents that they're accustomed to playing?
Well, teams schedule a lot of what they consider to be winnable games against lesser level opponents. They pay good money. You might get $150,000 to go for what they think is going to be an automatic victory. Sometimes they get fooled, but nevertheless, FAU would get a good paycheck. And the reason why I played so many of those games, besides the experience, was because a portion of that money would go back because a portion of the funds from the game would go back into our budget, so we then could do things to improve our program.
Yeah, I kind of figured that. I know the one guy that always likes to play the bigger opponents, obviously on a different level, is Tom Izzo, because he would use those big marquee games to build the resume if you end up winning. Whereas a different situation, like with FAU, like Howard Schnellenberger, he would also do the same thing as you did when he, schedule football games, like you say, winnable opponents, of course. But that's part of building an athletic program, especially a mid-major, isn't it? Where you have to really maybe sacrifice a little on the scoreboard, but you realize the bottom line is you have to do.
Well, everything comes in stages. I mean, you have to get what you need to be competitive. So sometimes it means you have to take a couple of losses in order to do that. And hopefully you're around long enough to see the fruit of your labor.
Okay. All right, Coach, let's talk about what you've been doing since you stepped aside from coaching.
Well, what I'm doing right now is I've been in the process of reinventing myself, so to speak, trying to do some speaking engagements. Just recently, I spoke at an Alzheimer's event in Ohio. And I've also been working as an adjunct professor at South Florida Bible College in Deerfield Beach, a great, great school, incredible president, Dr. Mary Dravick, great students, great faculty, and they teach and basically provide a quality education for folks that want to have a biblically based education.
Yeah, that place is right down the road from me off of Southwest 10th Street, so I know exactly where it is. I know if we ever get together and meet, I'll just have you meet me there, then I'll take you where we're going to go eat to dinner. It's not like you don't know where to find the place at all. It's probably in traffic 10 minutes, in out of traffic with my lead foot maybe 5. So it's really not so long.
Well, and it's a great school, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. And in fact, we just came back a couple of weeks ago from a spring break cruise with faculty and students, mainly faculty, went on a cruise, did some Bible study as well, and it was great.
Now I know before you came to FAU, craigangelos, you were involved with the church locally right before you took on the FAU job. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were living in Boca. I was attending Spanish River Church,
right,
and was working with ESPN at the time.
Okay, just want to make sure we got that. All right, so you coached Patrick Ewing. He was recently let go by Georgetown. I know you tend to stay in touch with Coach Ewing, Patrick Ewing, and ironically, I saw him in the 1982 Final Four. Albeit as a fan in New Orleans, I still think to this day the greatest Final Four that they've ever had, with the level of future Hall of Famers, Dean Smith, John Thompson, and the list goes on and on. But where do you think Patrick Ewing will land next?
Well, I spoke with Patrick a few days ago. He said he's going to take his time before he makes any decisions on his future. But one thing I know about Patrick, he will land, first of all, on his feet. As a youngster, he used to get knocked down a lot, but every time he got knocked down, he got back up quicker and better. So he will be back. I think that his next move will probably be back to the NBA as an assistant, and then see what happens from there.
I've always thought in my mind that Patrick Ewing should have gotten a head coaching job before he landed over at Georgetown, because I know he paid his dues as an assistant coach. I don't know why. I still hope that ultimately happens. But if there's ever a guy who deserves a head coaching job, I've always believed in my mind. And you know me, I've watched enough basketball through the years. Patrick Ewing definitely does. Can't sit here and tell me he's not as qualified as some of the other people that they're bringing on. Obviously they played basketball differently now than they did what he played, the more physical style of ball. But that's what I think about Patrick. He should be an NBA head coach. Why he hasn't, to me, is the biggest mystery on the planet. So.
Yeah, he should have. He should have had opportunities. We don't know why sometimes things happen, but he should have had opportunities. Make no mistake about it. And hopefully he'll get another opportunity down the road.
Okay. Coach, during your tenure at FAU, you led the Owls to an NIT appearance, which was a big deal. How do you define your time at FAU, especially since the team played a subpar 3,000-seat arena?
Well, you know what? It was great in many respects. Great because of the players and the staff. There were some things that could have gone a lot better. Some things that I could have done better. But we were competitive as hell. We were in almost every game. We came close to beat some pretty good teams. We beat some good teams. We won a conference championship, which was the first time I think FAU had actually won a conference championship. A team that I thought was NCAA bound, but we got upset in the league, the postseason tournament, the league's tournament, and we had to settle for the NIT. And then we took a bus ride and got beat at Miami, a team that we had played into overtime earlier in the year. So it was an interesting time. We had some really successful moments, beat some really good teams, but we also had some changes in administration, and a head coach is only as good as the person or people he works for. And unfortunately for me, it wasn't the right person at the right time. Craigangelos left, but it's good to see that FAU has a real, I think, a future star as ADs go in AD White, and he did a great job hiring Dusty, and obviously history is playing out right now.
So how much did that facility hamper you in terms of growing the program, since you followed Mattdoherty and Rexwolters? Because let's not kid ourselves, okay? I've been in that arena a lot, just like you have. I understand the roof, the lockers. I don't want to get into a whole drawn out deal over it, but let's face it, it's a small arena, for consider a Division I program, in a conference. But I got to believe, and the reason I ask you this question is I remember years ago at Michigan State how Tom Izzo moved into the Breslin Center, but I remember the old arena. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank on it, but Jennison Field, there you go. He obviously felt that the better arena would certainly enhance his recruiting efforts, but the FAU arena, how much did that hamper your efforts to try to get better players, knowing that you're relegated to an arena that holds about 3,000? And then when I was there with you, you can hear a lot. You can hear a lot of the loud echoes from the disgruntled fans or the happier ones, But the arena had to play a little part in terms of your recruiting efforts, didn't it?
Oh, it did. I mean, those are the kinds of things that only if you have them, they can help you. If you don't, they can hurt you. So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt if a kid is looking at a 3,000 seat arena, that would probably would have been a great practice facility, to be honest with you. Most schools have facilities like that to just practice in, and then they move into the arenas for their games. But I honestly believe that to have a 10,000 seat arena would not have been the answer either. I think something in between, maybe about a 5,500 seat arena. My son's at Fairfield, working in the administration there, and they just built a brand new basketball facility. It seats about 5,000. That to me would be the perfect size for FAU, big enough, and yet you could really do a lot of great things in an arena that size.
Boy, really, we always had this chemistry. We were together, but that is a great segue to where I'm going with this. Okay, so it remains to be seen whether or not FAU will actually upgrade the basketball and baseball facilities, and I'll bring up baseball because I'll get to that point in a moment. But do you think games should be played at the Panthers Florida Live Arena for blue blood type of opponents? They play the Orange Bowl Classic. You've got to play some Broward County anyways, which isn't that far. And I would think that if you're going to draw the North Carolinas, Kentuckys, and a lot of the bigger opponents, that's a suitable arena, even if it's a part-time venue to land some of the bigger fish to come here.
No, I think that would be great, to be very honest with you. We played in the tournament down there a couple of times. I went down this year to watch the Orange Bowl Classic. Right. And what I would probably do is I'd partner up with a school, whether it be FIU or somebody else, and say, let's play some double headers, bring in a couple of big name schools, let's play some double headers, let's split the gate. And I think that would be the way to go.
Yeah, also that leads to the baseball situation. I know every so often FAU will play games over at the ballpark of the Palm Beaches, and I saw when FAU took on Florida, it was really a great game. but I've always said that until they can get a better facility, because let's not kid ourselves. We know that baseball has an incredible tradition. I mean, geez, and I almost feel like their baseball stadium is like the Rodney Dangerfield of entertainment. It doesn't get the respect, knowing that you had Kevin Cooney and John McCormack there. But really, I really have a hard time wanting to go to that place. But I'll go to a game over at the Palm Beaches because it gives you more space to work. But at some point or another, when do they even address the ability to upgrade the baseball facility? Because this is a great, great program, the baseball program.
Well, I've said it many, many times, and John McCormack is a great baseball coach. He and Cooney, like you said, built a great baseball program. And if there's any one sport at FAU that I always said that could win a national championship, it was the baseball team. Yeah. That would be the first sport that I put money into, would be baseball. Yeah. Sports like baseball, like golf, like tennis, those sports we could play for national championships in those sports, no doubt about it. And now you've got basketball, which should only get better. And I know they have to address the facility, not just to upgrade the one they have, but to maybe expand it or build a new facility and keep that for practice. Okay.
Right. All right. I should let everybody know that the audio version of the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. So please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. So please also comment, like, and share the show. I mean, I bring on guys like Jarvis, Coach Mike Jarvis. No reason why you shouldn't comment on this one, especially, and share the broadcast. Want to be a guest? No problem. Send topic ideas to South Florida Tribune at gmail.com. If you want to advertise, call 954-304-4941. And we are live. A little Brent Musburger there on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Come on, Coach. I had to have a little bit of things with Brent Musburger. So, yeah. Now, when you talk about the fact that the football program built their facility ahead of everybody else, we know that football is a lifeline to try to finance a lot of it. But, how would you describe the football stadium? Is that the right size? And what do you think it'll take to get a lot of bodies in there? Because let's face it, basketball surged to the front of a pack, in the Final Four.
Well, I tell you what, I think the success that the basketball team is having and the notoriety and the publicity that they have received, I think that's going to help the football program immediately. Okay. I saw the football coach at the games. I thought that was great. He has a great reputation. Florida Atlantic has been knocking on the door. And, I think this is going to help them, to be honest with you. I think it's a lot easier for people to say, I'm going to a FAU football game now that they see the FAU Owls in the Final Four. So, I think, once again, all these things, work together for the good.
Well, I remember many years ago, like I do, okay, the basketball program by Denny Crum supported the football program for a while before Howard Schnellenberger went ahead and put it on the map. So we all know the impact of a great basketball program in terms of what it can actually do. So it sounds like, based on what you're telling me, Coach, that, we could probably see the same kind of thing developing at FAU.
Well, you know what? It's amazing. When I was talking to craigangelos, the AD who hired me, and Howard Schnellenberger, who wanted me to come to FAU so that we could work together. Mm-hmm. He thought, two older guys with a lot of experience and a winning tradition, heritage, could build something special. In fact, they were talking at one time about having a athletic complex, a facility that would accommodate both football and basketball, similar to the Syracuse situation, but at a little bit lesser volume, maybe, a football stadium that's seated around 30, 40,000, and a basketball stadium that can seat around 7,500, but all in one complex. And, I think the land is there. That's still something that could be doable.
Yeah, I agree. They need to do something there because, like you said, the current building now is more suitable for practice, and even women's basketball or whatever the case may be. But for men's basketball, I'm not trying to be partial toward one or the other.
No, you just.
So I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea that that's what I'm doing, because it's not the case. But I believe Rupparena, if I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, is it mainly for men's basketball? Then the women's uses the old facility on campus, if I remember right.
I'm not really sure. That sounds like it could be, and I'm sure the women with certain opponents probably play in the Rupparena as well.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I don't want to stir up a can of worms.
No.
Is not what I'm trying to do. So, all right. So you talked about it. Let's talk about the job that Dusty May has done, knowing he was concerned about taking the job afterwards and thinking it would be career suicide. Let's face it. He walked into a tough situation, and obviously facility driven. And I know you did the best you could with what you had to do. You scheduled the marquee opponents, but let's talk about the job that Dusty May. I'll bet a lot of people are thinking statue already for the guy, knowing what he's done in such a 5-year period. But give me your observations on Dusty.
Well, first of all, if you meet him, you like him. And that goes for not only fellow coaches, but players. He's a player's coach. He has a great manner. He has great way about him. He's a positive encourager, and I think the kids get confidence and courage through him and how he takes care of his business. So he's a consummate pro. I think he's only going to get better. I like the fact that he's an innovator. He will do some things differently than normal, than a lot of coaches do. So he's not afraid to make adjustments, and he adapts very well. As I was telling people weeks ago, he should be National Coach of the Year, and I think he's already won one of those. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's not the National Association Basketball Coach of the Year. He deserves it.
As a matter of fact, you're right. This is the last act if I ever saw one. So
really
with that said, can FAU build on this unimaginable Final Four run? And is success sustainable here, especially at Dusty May stage? We know I wouldn't be surprised if a pay raise comes faster than we can do that, right? So.
Well, I think that's already come, but I do think that I think they're going to continue to be successful as long as the athletic director is in place and he's in place. And now, where kids are transferring. I mean, this is always going to be a destination that a lot of kids will be really interested in. I mean, coming to South Florida. So I think they'll get some really good transfers. We know he can coach. I guess the next piece would be if they can get somebody to really put money up with the NIL that goes on now. I mean, we're basically paying players. I mean, and schools that can have a lot of money available for play will get players. So there's no doubt that I think they can continue to build. Whether or not they can sustain it at this level, that's another thing to be seen. We'll really start to see that a little bit better next year. They're going to move up in conference a little bit.
Right.
And, when you're playing against Houston and the Memphis is on a regular basis, it's going to be interesting to see how they do. But, I wouldn't put anything past this group.
Well, you bring up 3 interesting points. I'll go ahead and break them down one at a time. What are your thoughts about the transfer portal?
I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest with you. And even though I think at times it really can benefit certain kids, I don't like it because there's just so much movement. And people will say, well, coaches move, players can move, but there's almost too much movement right now. Kids are moving from school to school. The minute they're not happy, they're transferring out. They're leaving. So I think a lot of kids basically, forget the fact that the main reason why they're in college is to get an education. And yet at the same time, people will say, well, hell, I'm there to try and get, an opportunity to play maybe professionally. So if kids are legitimately going to class, furthering their education, fine, beautiful. But I think a lot of kids are not doing that. So I have a problem with it. Like I said, it's just, you'd hate to be in a situation where one year you got some kids you've recruited, you're developing, and then all of a sudden, they're leaving. And part of the problem is that there are a lot of schools that don't even wait for kids' names to be put in the portal. I mean, they're recruiting them behind closed doors. So that's a problem.
So do you think that's probably part of the reason like Roy Williams, Coach K, and a lot of the other older coaches are leaving the game because the job has become a lot more difficult because of the transfer portal? Of course, now the name, image, and likeness is another new wrinkle that we throw into the equation. Well, first of all, talk about the NIL, and then I want to backtrack over Roy Williams, Coach K, and I'm sure there's other ones I haven't even mentioned.
Well, I think putting that conversation in the same context, I think, is good. I mean,
okay.
The NIL, name, image, likeness, basically sets up a situation where players basically are can get paid to play. Some of them, I mean, as much, if not more than a coach. That can cause a problem. But at the same time, something had to be done. I don't think this was the answer, but nevertheless, this is what we got. Once things get out the barn, they stay out the barn. So now it's like, if you're a coach, you got to figure out, how do I take advantage of this? How do I use this opportunity? How do I use it to bring kids to my school? So that's the thing. I mean, there are coaches that in programs now that are hiring people just to help raise NIL money, so they can bring quality athletes to the school.
Well, all right. So let's talk about Roy Williams, Coach K, and a lot of the other guys that have retired. Do you think a lot of them finally had enough with all these major changes that either they got burned out, they were tired, they didn't want to deal with it? Because then you factor in the fact that unlike a lot of schools where, what FAU is going is they've got a lot of continuity with experienced players, juniors and seniors and all that business. But now we have one and done, so you can't keep larger groups together. But do you think that's why a lot of these guys stepped aside?
I think for the guys that you mentioned, I think it's just a matter of time. I think these things make it a little more difficult, but I don't think any one of those things would have driven those guys out, because they were in positions where they could take advantage of both the portal and the NIL. So they're not going to lose out on players usually that they want to get. And they're used to having a kid for 1 year. In fact, they recruit that way. John Calipari gets kids with the idea in their minds and his that they're going to be there 1, maybe 2 years. Right. So they're ready and they're prepared for it, and they've got the infrastructure to survive that.
So do you think a lot of other experienced coaches get tired out a little quicker because of all these changes instead of the ones that have already established themselves and are icons anyhow?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the game, it's a tough business, a great business, but it's a tough business. And yes, I think there are certain guys and certain programs that say, you know what, I can't compete in this arena anymore.
How would you have handled all these changes in your coaching career?
The best I could. I would have certainly, looked for the right kid to come in to fill a spot, similar to the way I guess Red Auerbach used to put the Celtics teams together. I'd certainly be looking at my team, my roster, and saying, I need a power forward, or I need a center, or I need a point guard. Let me go try and find the best one I can. So I'd be looking in the portal for that 1 or 2 players, hopefully no more than that. And I'd probably hire somebody or have somebody hired that would just be working on getting that NIL money together.
Yeah. I have to ask you this, but would you ever want to go back into coaching at this point in your life?
The answer, you know what, my wife would kill me if she heard me say the answer is yes, I would, but it would have to be with the right person. In fact, I'd probably be right now, the way in which I would want to go back would be to work with somebody to assist a younger guy. My dream job at one time was to basically be my son's assistant. That was the dream job that I had. That was my plan. God had other plans. So for the right young guy, oh yeah, I'd love to go back and basically be a a voice that he could listen to and basically make suggestions instead of decisions. Sure.
Well, I mean, Larry Brown had Penny Hardaway in Memphis for a while, so it's not like what you're saying is unrealistic. I mean, a guy like you can provide your experience and your guidance to somebody who, and I've seen, what was it, the guy from St. Joe's? Oh gosh, I'm really assisting Juwan Howard. I'm drawing a blank, but it doesn't really matter.
I'll think of it in a minute.
You know where I'm going.
Oh yeah. It's
Phil Martelli.
Phil Martelli, a great coach, a great guy. I coached. In fact, I got my first Division I win at GW against Phil and his St. Joe's teams, and we had many, many, many great battles. So yeah, it happens in certain situations. A young guy like Juwan Howard, who was new to coaching, says, I need an older, more experienced, not so much older, but I need a wise guy sitting next to me on the bench. And he hired Phil. Situation like that, yeah, Coach Jarvis would be ready to go. I don't know if his wife would be happy about it, but hey, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, did you ever have any aspirations to coach in the NBA though?
At one time, I did. In fact, when I was younger, my dream job was to coach the Celtics. I once had an interview with ML Carr for the Celtics job when I was a long time ago, and then I had an opportunity. If my agent had a better working relationship with Michael Jordan, I probably would have been coaching the Wizards at one time. But I wasn't really. At that time, I didn't really want to leave coaching in college. I really felt that I was supposed to be coaching college kids and not NBA men.
How would you define the current state of the NBA? It's gone from a 3-point shooters league to what we really enjoyed in the past. Do you think it's?
Yeah, well, basketball has changed. I mean, the European influence, the 3-point shot, the Euro step. The shot clock. I mean, all those things lead to a different type of basketball. I mean, the thing that I probably don't like about the way the current state of the game is everybody seems to play the same style. The thing I loved about the days of old is that you had all kinds of different coaching styles and playing styles, and it made the game, to me, much more challenging than it is right now. It's really about getting who gets the best talent.
Okay. So do you stay in touch with FAU much these days?
Honestly, no. I follow them. I root for them.
Right.
And I'm excited as anybody else to see how well they're doing. But, no, I mean, every now and then I'll go back and maybe talk to a class or something. But to be honest with you, no, I don't really have any real connection with FAU these days.
Yeah, and you know what? I asked you that because I worked with you, okay? And I'm entitled to my opinion, First Amendment. I felt that you were wrongly treated at the end. I didn't like the way you were treated there. And now I'm just talking because I saw it myself. Nobody's going to sit here and tell me this or that. I saw that you made every attempt that you could and commitment to build that program. And that's why I asked you this question, Coach. And for some reason or another, I didn't feel that it ended and they gave you enough tools to do your job so that you could maintain sustainability with your experience background. I mean, I'm just talking now. Okay, this is me, not you. And it's, whether it's loyalty with me towards you, forget that. I lived it with you, okay? And that's why I asked you this question. So do you feel a little sense of bitterness a little bit toward FAU at the way things ended?
Well, no, not towards FAU. And you notice I didn't mention the AD's name that was there, and I'm not going to. But I'm just glad that he's not there. Okay. Right now, because he, to be honest with you, wouldn't be worthy of the success that this program is now having. So I'm just glad that the changes were made. I'm happy for FAU. And yes, at the end of the day, I certainly deserve to, I think, have been treated differently and better at the end. And you want your endings. And I've always tried to leave a place better than I found it, and to leave it the right way. And I can go back to FAU and walk into the gym and feel good about what we tried to do, feel good about the kids that we brought in and how they played and how we competed. So I have no regrets, because everything happens for a reason. I mean, the fact that I'm now, working, helping out at South Florida Bible College, teaching a leadership course, is a blessing.
You don't have to, but I'll tell you what. Do you mind if I mention it? Patrickchun is, I believe, the guy who preceded White. Again, this isn't coming from you. I lived it. So,
I mean, you were there, and you've probably heard more things than I probably did, because I didn't want to hear a lot of things that were going on and being said. But you can say it. Of course, you can. And to be honest with you, there are people that to this day will say, you should have sued FAU. And to be honest with you, I didn't want to get into any legal battles with FAU, because it was. I don't think it was really FAU, to be honest with you.
Well, that's fine. Either way, I divulged the name because I lived it. So shame on me, right? Goodness.
Well, you know what? Good things happen, and it was good when the gentleman you mentioned. It was good when he got another job. He's I think far out west, and that was the best thing that happened to FAU in a long time. And so at the end of the day, usually you get what you deserve.
Yeah, I don't know how much further you can go in Washington State, but that's a long way. I guarantee you, unless you have a vehicle that goes 300 miles an hour, you get through all those interstates. The last time I take a West Coast drive that far, probably be about a 2 or 3 day drive. And if you want an airplane flight, there's a little bit of jet lag, obviously, to go with it. So again, I'm not here to badmouth Pat, but like I said, Coach, I lived it, so nobody's going to have to sugarcoat or candy coat with the obvious. It's just something that you and I are talking on our own. And I know that you did the best you could with what you had to work with. I mean, anybody that's ever been to the FAU arena will say, hey, you know what? You mentioned it earlier, my friend, okay, that this, to me, deserves to be a practice facility. And I know that they've got good facilities for football, but again, we mentioned a couple of times, that basketball and baseball lag significantly. Now, you made an interesting point about the NIT that Miami and FAU could have met, I believe. Is that correct?
We did meet.
You did? Okay.
We played at Miami in the NIT the year that, we won the conference and didn't win the conference tournament. So we did. We went and we lost the first round game at Miami. Yes.
Okay, well, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is let's dial it up to the Final Four. Miami against Connecticut. You know that area all too well. A lot of great coaches out of the Big East, obviously. And FAU gets San Diego State. If by chance the unbelievable happens in Jim Nance's last game, you might have a Miami FAU final. It's there. There's a 25% chance, no matter what we want to think of it, right?
That's
25%
right.
all the way around. I don't care about the odds of this team. Forget it.
Odds don't mean a thing. And FAU can just as easily win as San Diego State. Miami, they know how to win. They can beat Connecticut. I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. And there'll be a lot of people in South Florida rooting for that to happen tonight. Trust me.
Yeah, so with that said, I'll ask you for predictions. All right, Miami against Connecticut. Who do you have?
Well, I would say if both teams are completely healthy and both teams play the way they're capable, Connecticut would be the favorite. However, I know Connecticut. I'm not sure exactly which player, but I think they've got a little bit of maybe sickness going on. And, it's amazing how, if one guy gets sick, it can affect another guy or two. So, the the bug, whatever's going on with Connecticut, could really help Miami. But Miami could beat them anyhow. Miami's really, really good. And when you got a coach like Coach Larinaga, and you got players like they've got depth also. I mean, and they've just been winning games that just like FAU. Both teams have won games that they probably had no business winning, but the kids don't know that. And I think you got two teams from South Florida that believe right now they can beat anybody. And they just might.
So do you want to do Connecticut?
Well, I'm always partial to the home team, so I'm going to say Miami. A 1 or 2 point game, and I'm going to say Florida Atlantic, same thing.
Well, there you go. You only took the words on my mouth. They're 35-3, and they won a lot of games. And they'll go down in NCAA history as one of the teams that have won the most amount of games. I want to get to a couple more things. Plus, I want you to promote your book as well. All right. Number one, Lynn University. A lot of coaches didn't want to schedule them, but you did. Remember at your introductory press conference that I hit you with that question. All right, coach. The one question I always come to these press conferences with a question or two, in my mind, and I'm figuring somebody's not going to be sharp enough to come up with my question. And thanks to the fairness of Katrina McCormack, she got to me before anybody could get to that question. So the first thing I asked you was, Coach, do you plan on putting Lynn University on your schedule? And what was your answer?
Absolutely. When schools are that close to each other, it's going to create quite a bit of excitement. The big dog, which was us as compared to Lynn, right. You got to play teams. You got to take you got to basically sometime do that. But I just felt that it could create a lot of community interest, so you had basically two schools from the same, within minutes of each other. Almost touching each other's campus. I thought it would be great. And I'm just glad that we made it happen.
Well, first of all, you're not Kentucky. Why would you be afraid to schedule Lynn? No disrespect to Lynn, but let's face reality. You took on all comers. What you did. That's the one thing I loved about what you did. If there was an opponent out there, you would schedule it regardless of the division, class, or whatever, as well as a higher echelon blue blood. So, and you did. That's one thing about you. You'll schedule anybody. More power to it.
Well, thank you. And I was working on basically having a Palm Beach tournament. I had wanted to have a tournament and was close to putting a tournament together with us, with Lynn, at the time it was Kaiser, Rolly Massimino's group, Palm Beach. Basically, get 4 local schools to play in a tournament each year. That was the next thing we were working on.
Talk about the success of Nova University. 36 up, 0 down, 1 at all. What are your thoughts about, the fact that we have 3 schools in our area, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, that are competing at the highest levels of basketball? Could you have ever imagined such a thing where all 3, let alone Nova, would go undefeated and win the whole thing?
Wow, I tell you what, but that's a great school, and it's just a matter of some of the right pieces falling into place, and they certainly did. Just like with FAU this year. Some years everything goes right, some years everything goes wrong. You just want to be around when things are going right.
So let's talk about your legacy, not only as a basketball coach, but in terms of what you've tried to do. Everybody likes to talk about legacies and so forth, and I feel I want to find out about what should people know about Mike Jarvis, the legacy that you left, not only as a coach, but as a person itself, because you got to make sure you have, the left hand and the right hand. And I know, again, I've known you a long time anyways, but for people that don't know you as well as I do, what do you feel Mike Jarvis's legacy is?
I don't know. I never really liked when people talked about their own legacy. I always would prefer for somebody else to talk about it. Even though I think your legacy is a little bit different than your reputation. People help to shape your reputation. Other people, you shape your character, and character is part of legacy. So I like to hope that at the end of the day, people will say, he was a really good person. He cared about people. He tried to help people. He was a hell of a coach and a great competitor. And more important than anything else, he was a good dad, good grandfather, and a really good husband.
Well, let's face the reality. Your whole life, you've been a leader of men, students, and now you're carrying over to the Bible college.
Trying to, and it's not easy, but if it was easy, anybody could do it. So I just feel blessed that I'm healthy. My family, still, they still like me. And the good Lord said, I think it's got more work for me to do.
All right. Well, you wrote a book. And you know me, every time you come on the show, you get a chance to say whatever you want, as long as you want, about your book. So I'm not used to being quiet, but if you want to take 1, 2, 3 minutes to talk about your book, that means that my voice will last for maybe a little while longer. Just kidding with you. Believe me, if I ever needed a key insurance policy, I'd have to have it on my vocal cords anyways. But
yeah,
why don't you go ahead and promote your book anyways and let everybody know what it is and how they can get it and whatever you want to talk about.
Well, the most recent book that I was privileged enough to co-write is called The 7 C's of Leadership. It's the book that I'm using at the Bible College to teach leadership and life skills. The first book I wrote was Skills for Life. So Skills for Life books are located in a factory in somewhere in Florida. What I hope is that somebody someday will say, I want to make sure I put one of those in the hands of every kid in junior high and high school. So if you know anybody that's interested in mass distribution of a life skills book that's really applicable and practical, I got it. The 7 C's of Leadership. They are confidence. And they're all the things I think that, you're looking at this FAU team, confidence. You have to have that. First and foremost, courage to go out and perform and to try to do your best every single night. Commitment, you got to be committed. That's the 3rd C. Those all don't mean anything if you don't have character built into it. You got to be able to communicate. That's another C of one of my 7 C's. Community. It's all about building a team, and then the fact that you got to have a good head coach, and you got to be able to coach, and you got to be able to be coached. So that would be the 7th C. So put all those C's together. And if you can do some of those, all of those, and realize where your strengths and weaknesses are, accentuate the positive, you got a shot. So the 7 C's of Leadership can be, you can go to coachmikejarvis.com, or you can go to Amazon books and get a copy of the 7 C's of Leadership.
I just love your book. Yeah, so the one thing about your 7 C's, it kind of reminds me of Coach John Wooden's Pyramid of Success a little bit. And did you get the idea from Coach Wooden, that he had a certain road to get where you're at in order to create the idea and the concept for your book? Because I know when it comes to Coach Wooden's Pyramid of Success, I have it on my door at my office, and between that and your book, I don't think anybody can go wrong, at least trying to go ahead and incorporate any of those aspects of what their daily life is about.
Well, you know what the good thing is, and to answer your question, John Wooden I met years ago. In fact, I was coaching the McDonald's All-American game. My son, who was 12 at the time, was my assistant, and we met John Wooden in Wichita, Kansas, and I had followed him. In fact, the first Final Fours that I ever attended were his UCLA teams back in the days when Kareem was Lou Alcindor and Bill Walton was playing, and so forth and so on. And so, I got to know him. And obviously, any coach in the business knows about his pyramid. Most things that coaches do are from someone else. And so I think a lot of the building blocks that coaches used came from John Wooden, a wise, great teacher, and just a wise man who basically really was strong in his faith. He was a strong Christian man who realized that all of his gifts came from God, and he always gave God the glory, and loved the man. And obviously, history speaks for itself.
I shall let everybody know the audio version of the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. I want to repeat it again in case you're just joining us now. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers, so please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Want to be a guest? No problem. Send the topic ideas to southfloridatribune@gmail.com, and we'll pair you up with, whatever show your ideas are. If you want to advertise, no problem. 954-304-4941, and you get to talk to me, myself, and I. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Also, I can be contacted on Twitter at Tribune South. Coach, one other thing I want to end on. Okay, and that's it. You think that Dusty May at one point or another will probably leave FAU for a bigger job, or do you think that FAU has enough to keep this guy long term, knowing that, based on what you got, he's made, I hate to say this, a lot out of a difficult situation. Most people will say made a lot out of nothing, but boy, he's done an unbelievable job doing it. But do you think Dusty May will stay here a lot longer, or do you think at some point he'll move on to something else?
Well, I just, from what I know of him, from what I've seen, I believe that he's going to be here for a little while. FAU cannot afford to let him go. And the good news for FAU is all the big jobs have been filled. So it's not like he's going to get, if some of the schools had waited, then maybe, he would be presented with something that he could not refuse. Just imagine if, like, for example, Providence had waited, or Georgetown had waited, or one of those schools had waited, and they could come in and say, you know what, we're going to offer you $5 million a year. You might have to go. But I don't think but those jobs are all filled, thank God, for FAU. So now FAU's job is just to, and I think he's the kind of person, Scott, that I think it's more about contentment. And I think he could be very happy with a nice substantial pay raise, which he deserves.
Yeah, well, Dick Vitale, him like everybody else on the planet always said you can't buy happiness. But bear in mind though, Coach, he was making like under $600,000, and I know that the Connecticut assistant was like $650,000. But we know that's going to change after this. What this kind of reminds me of, as we call it today, is this. It reminds me of the NFL a little bit. The longer you win, it takes away your ability to get a head coaching job. And even though that may somewhat be the case, Coach, this time, okay, I guess I'll have to find out what the trajectory of the program is in terms of sustainability when the time comes that we're able to address this a year down the line. So I should point out, anybody wants to find us, you can also go to www.southfloridatribune.com. Kudos to Andy Ebling for everything she does. So, what a great opportunity to talk to Coach Jarvis, somebody that I think so highly of. I mentioned this earlier, and I'm not afraid to admit it. Coach, you are a father figure to me and a really good friend. And I don't think enough people can appreciate having a good father figure, that they can contact for guidance. And I think my legacy of you is, maybe I'm partial. I'm guilty as charged, okay? But when you have better father figures like I have with you, there's no way you can lose. And in my opinion, you're a winner in my book. 10 exclamation points and then some. So I appreciate you spending time on Final Four Day, joining me on the Sports Exchange, Coach. It's always a thrill to have you on, and I look forward to seeing you soon so we can go out to dinner and hopefully discuss future plans and what we want to do together. Anything else you want to add?
No, just the only thing I didn't mention, and I don't like to. Maybe I'm guilty sometime of not promoting enough, but if anybody's ever interested in contacting me about a keynote speech or a leadership speech or an inspirational, motivational speech, whether it be to young people, older people, it doesn't make any difference. I also can be reached on Facebook, Coach Mike Jarvis, or Twitter, at Mike Jarvis. And so, if anybody's interested in contacting me about a speaking opportunity, I'm available, and I'm also pretty reasonable. Okay, thank you.
Well, I believe that. Yeah. So, did you put an email address out there or anything like that? If you want to put an email, any contact information. And also, I should point out, you can be reached on South Florida Tribune because I have a special spot in there for your book as well. So, but no, I'm glad you mentioned it because I know that part of what you do is public speaking. I'm glad that you were able to include that at the very end of this show. So thank you very much for adding that here at the end. But is there any other contact info that folks should know about you in terms of public speaking and whatever else you may want to do?
They could contact me. There's an email that they could use, and that would be meet my head coach at gmail.com.
I will. If you're looking for a good mentor, motivational speaker, the man to my right, Coach Mike Jarvis, is as good as they get. And what can I say? I speak from experience, so I'm not being biased. I just know the man. Meanwhile, I want to thank everybody for taking time out here on this Saturday's edition of the Sports Exchange, Talking Hoops with former FAU basketball coach Mike Jarvis. Feel like we've covered a lot of good ground, and the topics that are necessary that we want to talk about addressing the Final Four. I'm sure I could do a lot of shows on you about coaching carousel. Didn't want to address that today. We wanted to make sure we talked about what we felt was necessary to bring everybody up to date about what you're doing, as well as the former school that you obviously covered. So
last but not least, go Owls, and let there be a hurricane to go along with it.
Oh, boy, you are great. Well, that gives you a taste of what this guy is capable of doing if he gets in front of a bunch of you. So go out there and contact Coach. But meanwhile, this concludes this edition of the Sports Exchange, and I look forward to seeing you on our next edition. And we will intro out here with our favorite theme song. And Coach, thanks again for being on, and let's talk for a moment after we get done. All right? Hang on.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.